But this morning we're going to be in John chapter 1. So turn over to John chapter 1 and then also Matthew 13. John 1 and Matthew 13. And you're going to have to hang on this morning because we're going to go rather quickly through the sermon. But just practical applications. The stories that we're going to read this morning really are just a continuation of what we're talking about with this Who's Your One series. Who's Your One? Hopefully by now you're reading the devotional, you're going through the weekly verses, you're just taking time as you're preparing and thinking, who is your one? So this morning I want to ask you, and we're going to talk about the theme is the importance of one. But have you ever thought what a difference one person can make? I mean, just one. You may not be able to, you're sitting here this morning thinking, not me. I can't make that big a difference. And I'm going to tell you this morning, you can make a big difference. Let me throw some names out to you. And tell me what comes to mind if one person made a difference. How about Rosa Parks? One lady who refused to give up her seat on a bus and started the civil rights movement. How about a guy named Frank Wills? Some of you are going, Frank who? Frank Wills. He was the one security guard at the Watergate office that brought down President Richard Nixon. How about Lee Harvey Oswald? One man who assassinated a president, unless you believe in conspiracy theories. Abraham Lincoln. One man who believed that all men were created equal and put an end to slavery. When you look at all these individuals, and there's so many more, they had no idea that they were going to be the one whose names would be remembered forever as people who one person made such an impact that they literally changed the course of history. One. And I believe that there are people sitting in this room today that not only will change the course of history, but I believe this. I'm not just saying this, that some of you will impact the course of eternity because of what you share with one person. So this morning, as we talk about the impact of one, if you want to be that one person who impacts all of eternity, I want to give you some things to think about this morning. Again, very, very practical. I want us to look at being an intentional witness. Being an intentional witness. If you're following along on the outline there, look at that, the first point, being an intentional witness. When we do things intentionally, that's when something really happens. That's when it's accomplished. The problem is in Christianity right now, so many people approach it casually. It's not intentional. It's just occasional, haphazardly, convenience. If nothing else gets in the way, then I'll take this step. Christianity's become, rather than a thing of where people are willing to lay down their life in a martyr situation, now it's a comfort situation. If it fits the rest of my life, then I'll be part of it. Well, as we go through that, I want you to look at John chapter 1. John chapter 1, the importance of being just an intentional witness. Look what it says in verse 45. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him of whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote." Who'd they find? Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. And Nathanael said, and I couldn't say this any better than those kids. And Nathanael said to him, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" And Philip said to him, "Come and see." He didn't try to give him deep doctrine, deep theology. He just said, hey, come and see. Come meet this guy. Come see what's going on. He'll change your life. Just come and see. And I think sometimes we make this process so complicated. I want us to be a little more like Philip this morning. What did he do? He picked one. Who did he go see? Nathanael. He intentionally went to Nathanael. He reached his one, and he used these words, come and see. Come and see. I'm going to share with you this morning just some very, very practical things. I want this to be one of those sermons where you see the biblical application, but it's so practical that you walk out the doors and go, man, I can use this. I can do that. I don't want it to be so deep you go, I can't do this. And I think what's happened is we have scared the church. In fact, what ends up happening is people don't share their faith because they say, what if I get asked a question that I don't know the answer to? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? Who am I to go share? Oh, those people know me. I can't talk to them. And the problem is that because of the things that we have basically put into people's minds as to why they can't share and allowed the fears to grow, 96% of people, listen to this, listen, 96% of the people who come to faith in Jesus will be people who were personally invited, and yet we're afraid to invite. We're afraid somebody's going to tell us no. We're afraid to go out and just share the gospel. We're afraid to get out there and talk about our faith. What if they ridicule me? What if they put me down? What if I don't know these answers? What if? And instead of talking about the what ifs this morning, I want us to talk about the opportunities. Let me give you that statistic one more time. 96% of the people that will come to faith in Jesus were personally invited by someone else to come to an evangelistic rally, to come to a church service, to come to a Bible study. Let me ask you, how many of you came to know Christ as a result of somebody at some time inviting you to something like that? Raise your hand, would you? Look across the room. Now, we actually have more that found the Lord even without that invite. But imagine the response when you just invite someone. Here's another statistic. This week, only 20% of believers will invite another believer to come to church with them. Let me say that again. This week, statistics show that only 20% of followers of Jesus Christ will invite another follower of Jesus Christ just to come to the church with them. That's inviting believers. And listen to this one. Only 2% of believers, followers of Jesus Christ, will ever invite somebody to come to church. And that's somebody being an unchurched or non-believer. See, it's easy to invite fellow believers. It's easy to invite friends that know Jesus that might go to another church. You want them to come here, come there. That's called swapping sheep. Somehow we've come to the idea that that's okay, that God's pleased when we go from church to church to church. I'm telling you, when you come into God's family, we're all on the same team. We don't need to be inviting other people from other churches as much as we need to be out there in the world and sharing the gospel and telling people about Jesus. And only 2% of believers will ever in their lifetime invite an unchurched or unsaved person to come to church with them. That ought to cause us to stop and say, what's going on? Now, the words come and see. I want to take you back to how easy that is. Your life is a come and see opportunity. Do you realize that? What God did in your life is your come and see opportunity. When you share your testimony of who you were before Christ and you tell them what Jesus did in your life and they see the difference, man, that's a come and see opportunity. You don't have to know all the words. This is where people get hung up. They say, what if they ask me a question I don't know the answer to? You realize that we use the term witness. Be a witness. A witness in a court of law is only responsible for what? The truth, what they know. They're not responsible for anything they didn't see, not responsible for anything they didn't hear, not responsible for anything they don't know. Just tell me what you know. So if we take that line of thinking, and here you are, you're a witness, just simply sharing with others what has taken place in your life, you are a come and see opportunity. You say, listen, I don't have all the answers, but all I can tell you is this is what God did in my life. One of my favorite stories when I get to something like this is my father-in-law. His testimony is a come and see opportunity. If you've ever heard Flora share the testimony of how her dad came to know Christ, it's just such a neat story. He was one of the neatest men I've ever met. But he's a guy who was Navy. Yeah, he was involved in the Navy background. Rough guy, I mean, on every side, rough. But the day came where there was a pastor that invested himself in my father-in-law. He was an older man, and they owned a business where they sold plants and produce and all that. And this pastor would come down there constantly, and he'd have a glass of orange juice. And he'd sit there and talk to my father-in-law. And the day came, and I'm fast-forwarding and shortening the story a lot this morning, but the day came where he trusted Jesus Christ as his personal Savior. And his life changed. He was an alcoholic who never took another sip. The day came where they were as a family having devotions, and Dad said, honey, pray that Daddy will quit smoking. He said, my wife said, Dad, we're already praying for that. That was the last night he had ever had a cigarette. The language changed. The culture changed. Everything about him changed. What changed him? Having all the answers to theology, knowing all the doctrine? No, Jesus. when he made that change, he was a come and see witness and testimony for Jesus Christ. And his life reflected it. Man, he talked to everybody about God. What about you? You've got a story. Rather than thinking I have to have my master's degree or a doctor of divinity degree in order to be able to answer all these questions, I just want you to understand that God's saying, all you need are these words. Just come and see. Come and see. You know, you look at all this and you start thinking about these people that have these stories, and I would ask you, my father-in-law had a bunch of people that came to see. What about you? Can you name somebody that you've intentionally made the effort in their life, that you've led to Christ, that you're discipling, that you've taken through the waters of baptism? You're saying, man, this is a person that God allowed me to have that opportunity. And if you say this morning, no, I really haven't. So maybe you're in that 2%, but you know it's not too late. You can change this anytime. It's as simple as just inviting someone. You say, well, you know, I just don't know if I can really be that intentional about it. Let me give you an idea here. Some of you this afternoon are going to watch football. You've got a team that you pull for. And you try to persuade people to pull for your team, don't you? See, we can do it in other areas. You'll try to get people to pull for your team. You wear their attire. You talk to them about the team. You talk about the stats. You talk about all that. My granddaughter, who's 5, we go back and forth. And some of you know the background, but her other grandfather was defensive coordinator for the Steelers until this year. And so we go back and forth. And I'd talk to her about the Dolphins, and she'd tell me, no, it was the Steelers. This is 5, okay? She was brainwashed. She'd come to our house, and I'd pull out my big dolphin towel, and she'd be getting out of the tub, and I'd walk in there, and, Hadley, I've got your towel for you. And she'd go. And I'd say, listen, you can use it or drip dry. And she looked at me, and she says, I'll drip dry. She's not using it. I'd pull the blanket out, and here'd come the Dolphins blanket. I'm not using that. And I'd get up there, and she'd pull out her terrible towel and come and swing it around the living room. Even at that age, we talk about sports teams and we have fun with these things. There are people that right now in Christianity are so wrapped up in persuading people intentionally, trying to get them to follow their arguments and trendy theology. And you get this stuff you hear about all the Calvinism and Arminianism. And I'm gonna make this real simple this morning. You guys realize Calvin's dead, right? Arminius is dead, right? Jesus is alive. Let's talk about Jesus. Do you get that? So in all of these things where people are so dogmatic in what they believe, I'm going to tell you, get dogmatic about the right things. How about this one? Denominations. Man, people try to say this denomination's right, this denomination's right, this denomination's right. How about winning people to Jesus? How about political positions? All you have to do is just hit the easy button in the office, and man, the political conversations start, don't they? If you were to hit the easy button in your group this morning, you may not have connected in the connect group. There may have been dissension because you're on different political sides. So talk about Jesus. Don't talk about the other things. We worry so much about things that just don't matter. Here's one. Do you know how many people have tried to convince me that sushi is good? I'm telling you. And my response is always the same. So if you come up to me today and you say, come on, we're going to go try some sushi. I'm going to convince you that this is good. My response to you will be the same as it is to everybody else who's tried this. I don't eat bait. I fish with it, okay? It's like, man, cook me something. Don't hand me something raw. But we are intentional. My point is this. We're so intentional on other things that won't matter in 10 years and they won't matter in 100 years. And we're less intentional about the thing that will matter for all of eternity. I just want to encourage you this morning that based on what Philip said, come and see. Let's be intentional about inviting people to come and see. Point number 2, go and tell. Go and tell. Come and see and go and tell. Matthew chapter 13. I mentioned to you to keep your finger over there. Let me read you this passage. Matthew 13, beginning in verse 45. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant seeking beautiful pearls, who, when he had found one pearl of great price, went and sold all that he had, and he bought it. I want to read a section here from Michael Youssef. He wrote about these verses. He says this: In this parable, Jesus shares the kingdom of heaven. It's like a merchant looking for fine pearls. There are two things you must know about pearls to understand the biblical illustration. First of all, back then, pearls were the most precious commodity. Not one of the precious commodities, but the most precious commodity. More highly valued in that day than diamonds. Pearls were greatly valued because diving for the oysters that contained the pearls was an extremely hazardous exercise. There were many people who lost their lives diving for these oysters. So both the beauty and the scarcity of the pearl made it extremely valuable. And people often gave all their money and belongings to possess just one priceless pearl. It was on the cruel Roman cross that the only perfect God-man suffered, bled, and died. It's only through his grinding death on the cross and his ultimate resurrection from the dead that the priceless pearl of salvation is made available. Nothing can be compared with this pearl. Only through the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ can we be assured of heaven. Only through him can we find forgiveness of sin. He's the only one who provides true peace of mind, security, identity, and rest for our souls. I found the pearl of great price. If you're a Christian, you have found the pearl of great price. And if God can use Nathaniel and Philip once they come to Christ, he can certainly use you. When we think about those verses and this idea of that pearl of great price, when we have something so valuable, you have to tell somebody. It's one thing to say, hey, come and see. If you don't know all the words and you're a new believer and you have a story to tell, you just say, come and see. But man, when something happens and you understand and you're able to go and tell, it makes a big difference. If you have a new baby, do you tell anybody? Guess it depends if it's a pretty baby or an ugly baby, right? No, you're going to go tell somebody because you're going to think that baby's beautiful no matter what. When you have a new grandbaby, you're going to go talk about that new grandbaby, aren't you? You want people to see it. You hear all these grandpas. You got a brand new grandbaby, don't you? How about that? Well, how about you win the lottery? You're going to tell somebody, but you are not going to tell the preacher because you're going to go, he's going to expect me to tithe. So, no, you're not going to tell him. You get a new job. You post it on social media. You hear the C word in your life, and so you're getting cancer treatments, but you hear these words. They're in remission. You're going to tell somebody. So see, when big things happen in our lives, we got to tell somebody. We got to tell somebody. My sins are forgiven. I'm adopted into the family of God. I got a promise of heaven. And we don't tell somebody? Come on, we're not viewing salvation the right way. We don't really understand the pearl of great price if we're not willing to share with folks what's happened. We have to get excited about talking about our salvation. Now, too many of you are going to go, I don't know how to tell them. I don't know what to say. Let me give you some illustrations here. Have you ever met a young lady that's engaged that needed lessons on how to tell people she's engaged? Here's what they do. They get a ring on their finger and they walk around like this. I'm sharing engagement 101. You've never heard that class offered, but you've seen plenty of this, right? They post it everywhere. They tell it everywhere. They scratch their face like this. They scratch your shoulder like this. I mean, they want you to see that ring. You don't have to worry about teaching them how to do that. Need lessons on how to show off a new car? You'd be sitting out there in that parking lot, just standing there wanting to talk to somebody. Hey, come here. Let me tell you something. We need to talk. Oh, is that your car? Oh, yeah. You bait people over there to come see that car. Rev the engine, drive it around, circle the building, coming to pick up your wife, all these things. You need lessons on how to talk about a new grandbaby? Do you guys need lessons on how to talk about a new grandbaby? Neither do I. You know how easy it is? Look up here. That's the way you talk about a new grandbaby. Do we have any more? Oh, yeah, look at that. You want to see more? You'll have to come to me after the service. We got a new grandbaby. It's easy to talk. I mean, I can tell you whatever you want to know about that grandbaby, except for the formal stuff, like how long was it, how much does it weigh? Who cares? I just get to hold him. I mean, man, we don't need classes on how to talk about things that are important to us. When it comes to our faith, we get this idea that I haven't gone through all the discipleship classes. I haven't gone through the evangelism class. I don't know all the doctrine. I can't talk to anybody. Come and see. Come and see. Go and tell. This is so simple. You say, preacher, I'm scared to death. Do you know that in the sermon series we've been going through now, we've been making these cards. We put them out in the lobby and we just take the cards. You say, I don't know what to do with it. You go out to lunch, you lay it on the table, you put it right there with your tip, if it's a good tip, okay? If it's not a good tip, get a card from another church. If it's a good tip, you put our card on there. You talk to them about Jesus. You make it simple. We give out these shirts all the time that say grace on the front or on the back, and wear your shirt. The one, He is risen. You'll get comments. I'm back. You'll get comments. If you've worn those shirts, you know they're conversation starters. People will stop you and say, hey, I like your shirt. The one, ladies, the most popular shirt we've given out as a church is the one that the Proverbs 31 woman. And I'm telling you, my wife wears it. She's like, you're not going to believe it. I got another comment or compliment. And all these things are so easy. They're just simply conversation starters. You know how to share the gospel? Share it. You don't know how to share the gospel? You just say, come and see. Do you know this is the easiest time of year that we're going into for us to share Jesus? Let me give you some illustrations. Halloween's coming. Trick or treat. Somebody comes to your door. How many times do people come and knock on your door? You're going to have a steady line of people coming to knock on your door. Opportunities to drop in cards or tracts. Give them some candy, too. The kids won't be real impressed with the tract. But you know what? There's no other time people are lining up coming to your door on a steady basis, and you can drop tracts right there. There's Thanksgiving coming up. Man, you know how easy it is to invite somebody to come on over and have a piece of pumpkin pie or a turkey sandwich after Thanksgiving. And you know, with Christmas Eve coming, people are looking to go to different services. Do you know this year, and I'm so excited about it, Christmas is on Sunday? Man, I'm excited about that. I love when Christmas falls on Sunday. It happens this year. Do you know how easy it's going to be to invite somebody to come with you? We're going into the time of year that it's really simple. Here's one of my favorites. New Year's. Somebody's going to say, did you make a New Year's resolution? And you say, I sure did. My resolution is to talk to all my friends, relatives, associates, neighbors about Jesus. Hey, by the way, what about you? Do you know Him? Man, there are so many things to do in this time of year to share the gospel, and it just gets so easy. Don't complicate it. Make it simple. Come and see. Go and tell. How about the last one here? There are a lot of excuses that people give for not sharing the gospel. I'm going to go through these very quickly, and I just want to make them, bring them up for awareness' sake, because we have to get past them. We have to recognize or repent of the excuses. The first one is this: spiritual lethargy. It's a lack of spiritual growth. People that have been saved for years, it's just they grew up in the church, they don't know anything different, they're not excited about the Lord, there wasn't any major change in their life, they're not growing, they're not reading, their prayer life really stinks, and so they're just not excited about their faith. Obviously, they're not going to share it with somebody. So I would ask you this morning, if you recognize that in yourself, how's your prayer life? How's your church life? How's your devotional life? How are these things going in your life? Because if you're excited about Christ, you're going to talk to somebody about Him. The closer you are to God, the more you want to talk about Him. Here's the second one: growing inclusiveness. Growing inclusiveness. There's this idea that now, and we're buying into it, it's this idea that Jesus isn't the only way to heaven. There must be other ways. And we're afraid to say something because somebody might say we're intolerant. Somebody might say, oh, really? You believe that's it? And we're so afraid of being labeled that we're starting to sidestep truth. And I'm going to tell you today, He is the way, the truth, the life. No man comes to the Father except through Jesus Christ. We got to get past that. Let's start talking there. It's not inclusive, it's exclusive. And few there be that find it. We better tell some people. Here's another one: a disbelief in hell. Jerry Johnston, the evangelist, said this: if we could take one busload of believers to hell for 10 minutes, the world would never be the same when they got back. The truth is, we don't believe in hell the way the Bible talks about hell. And I'm not going to say a lot about this week because I'm actually going to preach on that next week. What does the Bible say about hell? Just the facts. That's what we're going to talk about next Sunday. How about this one? Busyness. Busyness. We pack our schedules so full of non-essentials that we don't have time for the things that are important. We don't have time for spiritual things because they're so full with other things. How about the fear of rejection? The fear of rejection. I'm going to make this one simple. Get over it. Just get over it. You're going to get rejected on a lot of things in life. It might as well be that we get rejected over the spiritual things and realize people aren't rejecting us. They're rejecting the message, but just keep telling them. A desire to be tolerant ties in a little bit with what we had talked about before, but it even goes above and beyond the inclusiveness. Culture today does not want to be offended. And the church has bought into this to where we just can't, we got to be careful. And I'm going to tell you, we're still called light in the darkness. And I've shared with you the illustration, and the best one that comes to my mind is when I was in that hotel in Belize, Central America, and flipped on the light switch and the floor moved. It had legs and it ran. That's what happens when the Church of Jesus Christ takes the message of the gospel out into a sin-sick world. Darkness flees when the light of Christ is shone upon it. We need to do that. Losing the habit of witnessing. Losing the habit of witnessing. A lot of people have lost it. It is a habit. When you engage with habits, then they become easier and easier and easier, whether they're good habits or bad habits. I remember learning to drive a standard shift car, a stick shift car. And as I was learning, my aunt was teaching me, and she had an old, I think if I remember right, it was a 280ZX or something at the time. And man, that was a great little car. And it would bounce like crazy. I'm telling you, I'd shift it and it'd go boom, 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 boom. And I remember working on that. She was very patient. I remember my dad saying this, one day it'll be second nature. You won't even think about it. It's just going to be second nature. And I thought, yeah, right, that's not going to happen. Now, I haven't driven a standard shift car in probably 10 years. The last thing I drove was a bus, but I would almost bet you I could hop in that car today and just drive a stick shift car. And I may bounce it once because I haven't done it in a while, but it became second nature. You didn't think about it. Didn't even think about it. Habits develop the more that we do them. And the same with spiritual habits. The more you talk about Jesus, the easier it gets. Here's another one, letter H, lack of accountability. Lack of accountability. I've learned this in our society and across our culture right now. You're seeing pastors and mega churches falling like flies. It seems like one a month, if not more. And if you hear these words, I work for God, look out. Because that means I don't want any accountability. That's all I want. You just leave me alone. I'm working for Him. Don't ask me any questions. Well, let me tell you, with our church staff, on Monday mornings, we sit in a room back here, our conference room, and in our staff meeting, we go around the table, and each person shares a witnessing experience that we had during that week. An opportunity to invite someone, whether it's as simple as leaving a card or having a full-on conversation. If the pastoral staff's not doing it, how can we ever lead the church to do that? So we have that conversation every week. There's accountability. I want you to know that even with our staff, to share the gospel with others. How about the last one here? Letter I, church not intent on reaching the lost. I got to tell you, we're seeing this more and more and more and more, where churches are gathering places. They're culturally fun. There's people that are coming together for the shows, but the reality is we've lost our focus. I mentioned to you before, we've got these theological ideas that are surfacing that are not new. They're hundreds of years old that are coming on the scene, and people are being swept away thinking all this is new. And I got to tell you, quit talking about the junk and just start talking about Jesus. Because in those churches, many, if not most of them, they're all declining. It's not trendy. It's sinful when we make another message more important than the gospel. And I want to say, in this church, let's make sure we keep Jesus first. So how do we wrap all this up? I told you today, I just wanted it to be so practical. Come and see. You're going to remember this when you leave here. Come and see. You got a story for people to come and just see your life. Go and tell. As you mature and as you develop in your faith, you go and tell. So you invite them to come and see. As you grow and you have the information, you go and tell, and you get over the excuses and just start doing it. Can one person make a difference in the world? Yeah. Benjamin Franklin? Hey, I'm glad he discovered electricity. Thomas Edison? Man, I'm thankful for him every time I flip a light switch. They impacted our culture. Elon Musk? Electric cars? Not a big fan just yet. But space travel? Hey, he's impacting culture, whether you like it or you don't. Reality is he's making a difference, and many others have impacted this world. But it shouldn't stop there. The question this morning is, can one person make a big difference and impact eternity? And the answer is yes. A couple of months ago, I shared with you the stories, and I'm not going to repeat them this morning, of the one man, the shoe salesman, that went in and led D.L. Moody to Christ. D.L. Moody, one of the greatest preachers of all time, greatest evangelist. And it was a common man, a Sunday school teacher, that just went in and shared the gospel, not knowing that he was going to be the one to lead D.L. Moody to Jesus. And thousands and tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, came to know Jesus because that one man shared the gospel with D.L. Moody. Somebody shared the gospel with Billy Graham. And Billy Graham has touched thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of lives because one person shared the gospel with Billy Graham. He said, preacher, I just don't know. I don't know if I can do this. You all have a hobby. You all have an interest. You all have a platform. You all have friends, relatives, associates, neighbors. Imagine if we just took our platform and we used it to share Jesus. Turn your attention to the screen for just a moment. Listen to this testimony, and then we'll close out this morning.
I grew up here in Atlanta, went away to college. Track was a big influence on my life. I started running when I was 8 years old, and didn't know where I was going to go, how far I was going to take it, and I just fell in love with it. Just from that moment, that first day of practice, I was like, man, like, I want to do this. Like, I want to take this as far as I could take it. At the age of 8, I knew I wanted to be as great as I could possibly be in that sport. And God was kind to really allow me to experience a lot of success through it, from the youth level to the high school level to the collegiate level to even the professional and world-class, world championship level as well. From there, it was just like, oh wow, I'm living my dream. I'm getting a chance to do what I remember as an 8-year-old, what I said I really wanted to do. And I'll be honest, like even then, I was very carnal. Like it was very much early on when I first started. It was a lot about me, but man, God was so kind to allow me to have success, but also recognize like He wanted me to use this not as a platform for Milton's glory, but for His. And He really did. He really gave me some great opportunities for gospel opportunities and ministry impact through my track and field career. I think for me, it's like trying to figure out in each season, like who is God bringing into my life? And I'm constantly trying to figure out like, okay, how do I turn this into a spiritual conversation? For me personally, there's a couple people who I think I'm constantly praying for, like the coaches on my team. And these guys, some of them are not believers. And so about 2 or so weeks ago, we invited the track team to church to kick off our services. And there's two of the individuals, coaches on the team, who I was like, I don't know if they're gonna come, because I know I've had gospel conversations with them, and they've told me where they stand, and they end up coming. And even very impacted by the message and the time together. And so like these brothers are very much on my list as I'm praying for, that the Lord will bring them to saving faith. Who's that person who God has strategically brought into your life that He wants you to be an influencer, that they might enter into the kingdom? And I think it may not happen overnight, but I think it's just being intentional. And we're all called to figure out, how do we leverage our influence? I think God is always asking like, hey, what's in your hand? Like, who is in your sphere of influence that maybe God may want to use you to invite into the kingdom? I think about Exodus chapter number 4, where God, tells Moses like, what's in your hand? And that's always just been so impactful for me, because I think, yes, that has to do with your gifts and ability, but it also has to do with your influence. And so for me, I always just look at it like in each season, like, okay, what has God put in my hand in this season that I could use for His glory? And that's the reality. Like, I think if we really understand, like as we embrace the reality, like We did not save ourselves. It wasn't one day Milton woke up and said, you know what, I'm tired of being against God. No, it was God pursuing me. It was God relentlessly going after me, and through his kindness, making me aware of his gift of salvation that brought that about. And I think as we rest under that reality, I think it really frees us up to know, like you're right, like me having this conversation, the pressure is not whether they say yes to the Lord. That's not on me. The obedience and faithfulness for me is, will I open my mouth? He's not asking me to save them. He's asking me, hey, Milton, will you take a risk to be a little socially awkward, if you will, to have a conversation about this person's eternal condition? I am also the one who's going to draw them to me, or, man, I am in control of all that part. The faithfulness on your part is, Milton, when you open your mouth. And when you think about that, it's scary still, but it really is pretty easy. I'm Milton Campbell. I ran track and field and a world champion and world record holder. I have my one, so who's your one?
Isn't that great? What's in your hand? So let me summarize this morning. Come and see. Go and tell. Get over the excuses and figure out what's in your hand. What is your opportunity? Is it your job? Is it your hobby? Is it your neighborhood? What is it that you do that can be your tool for sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ? God will use whatever it is that you love and give you an opportunity to take that and use it as a witnessing opportunity for him. So I'm going to ask you for a moment, would you just bow your heads and close your eyes? Right there in your seat, we're going to give an invitation, an opportunity to respond to the message this morning. My first question is this: are you one that came this morning to come and see? So let me see what's going on in that place. I've got things going on in my life. I want to go and see what's going on in this place. And maybe this morning you came and you saw that we're practical in our application of what Scripture teaches. There's a message of God's love. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him will not perish but have everlasting life. And you came and you heard and you saw that that's what this place is about. We want to figure out what's the way we can motivate our church family to get out there and share the message of God's love, God's grace, God's forgiveness, God's reconciliation of mankind to himself. So maybe you're the one this morning that you're here and you say, you know what, I want that. So with our heads bowed and eyes closed, if that's you, I invite you, pray something like this: Dear God, this morning I understand this whole thing is really a love story. How that you loved me so much that you sent Jesus to die on the cross, to pay the penalty for my sin, and to purchase a place in heaven for me. So right now, the best way that I know how to do this, I'm inviting Jesus into my life. I want him to be my Savior today. And if that's you, in a moment, I want you to mark that on that yellow card so that we can have a conversation later. I just want to follow up with you and talk to you about that. For everybody else in the room, maybe today is your challenge of go and tell. Who do I need to go tell? Who do I need to go talk to? The Lord laid somebody on your heart that you can walk up to them and invite them. Hey, I don't have all the words, but just come with me and see. Maybe he's laid it on your heart. You've been saved for years. You know how to share the gospel, and this morning he's tapping you on the shoulder. Go and tell. And for each one in the room, maybe he's saying, hey, let's get rid of the excuses and let's figure out what's in our hand. What tool has God given us in our life to use as an instrument to share the gospel? And I want to pray for you this morning. Father, as we conclude this morning and we wrap things up, we've taken two simple passages of Scripture. One, Philip and Nathanael, and the words, come and see. Another, Lord, over in Mark, where it just simply said, go and tell. God, we can do that. We've so complicated the gospel through the years. We've made it to where we think only the professionals can talk about what's going on And the reality is you made the message so simple that anybody can talk about the love of Christ, either through our life story, telling people to come and see, or through the deeper conversations where we go and tell. But Lord, the big thing that we need to see this morning is we got to get past the excuses. We've got to move past that so that we can start this. We don't want to be among that 2%. Or we actually do want to be among the 2%. We don't want to be among the 98% that never share their faith. So God, I want to challenge this church family that we would rise to the occasion, that we would love you so much that we just have to go tell somebody. And I pray that in Jesus' name. Amen.